What's happening, fellas? It's your boy Hardcorn, and today we're cutting a rug with Kurenai. This little vampire packs quite a punch, and we're going to take a look at her skills, supporters, and most of all, if she's worth it. Now let's talk about Kurenai. Let's talk about what it means to be a pure strength character and designed to be someone that is an instant top tier. Kurenai has very few drawbacks in her playstyle, skills, and stats. She's at the top of the mountain and will be able to keep her claim for an extremely long time. She can hold this due to her high aggression style and good damage. But the real stake to her claim is the critical hits. Her critical hit rate is already serviceable, but then it gets jacked up with her skill God's Eye, and then it gets supplemented even more with her Taimanin art. Her speed is incredible, and she has abilities to increase the speed even further so that her criticals can come out more often. Even before such boosts, she already has low windups and fast hits. At higher speeds, it almost looks like someone hit fast forward on her. She doesn't have a lot of starts and stops in her regular attack string either. I mean in the sense that like Ingrid's first few hits hold her in place before she's flung forward on the next few hits of the combo. Kurenai doesn't have that. Kurenai moves in a very meaningful way with all her attacks, and I've never been more delighted to see her just come in with an overhead stab and then just go down on him like a maniac. If you've ever thought about doing a critical hit and critical damage build, she's exactly the go-to girl for that. God's Eye is an incredibly powerful buff to her critical hit rate, and it allows her to just carve tens of thousands of damage into whatever is in front of her. She's got such a safe playstyle with this on, because everything she touches dies when it's active. However, when it's off, she's going to have to play keep away for a moment until it comes off cooldown. She's got a sort of decision tree you can do in terms of critting and God's Eye. Outside of it, she's going to bide her time and try to lower armor bars and get that super meter up. But when God's Eye comes off of cooldown, that's when a decision is made in terms of what you brought. God's Eye isn't specific to just basic attack string or what have you. It's critical hit rate, so it's going to affect everything she has. With it lasting 6 seconds, it's long enough to use even the charged up skills like Storm Fang or Tornado Red. Now with a few tweaks, you can get some nasty high damage combos going and keep her moving at the same time, like the good old Puff and Sting Extinguisher combo. Many of her skills have a low startup and ending frame, so she can really get in and get out within that 6-second window. Her attack style is all about incredible aggression and overwhelming the opponent with extremely fast and hard hits. She embodies the break chaining strategy, because by the time God's Eye is off of cooldown, the enemy will be out of groggy. When they're out of groggy, of course they're dangerous, so all Kurenai has to do is bait an extreme dodge and get back in there and break their armor. She plays by making sure others can't do the same. It's why fighting her in her high arena tower situations is so difficult. You'll just explode. The shoe is truly on the other foot when you're against her. You get to feel just as powerless as the enemies do. Her Taimanin art gives her a bonus to damage and particles, so her crits hit even harder. However, it also adds in a series of extra extremely high damage slashes. The whole attack string is fast, so you can get in a skill and then get in a few more meaty slashes in during God's Eye to just tear off the head of whatever you're up against. They're most likely dead after a combo like that. Tower enemies in their incredibly spongy health, she can easily do 100k damage and beyond in a combo to just evaporate even the toughest of enemies. And there's no such thing as a bad skill on her either. It's just different situations to be great. God's Eye truly makes her a one-trick pony. However, this one trick is so incredibly powerful and versatile, it keeps her relevant even with new additions. Even being this way, she sounds perfect, like there's nothing wrong with her. She does have her shortcomings though. One being that she's overly reliant on God's Eye to deal any real damage. She does alright without any sort of boosters, but requires a buff in God's Eye to be meaningful. Her healing skills are also somewhat picky to use, one being a combo finisher that requires learning of a timing, and also one heal that requires her to take damage. The timing can be learned and the damage can be completely healed back, but I like my healing to be one and done, no gimmicks. Because if you have to heal as Kurenai, you're not doing enough damage. Now let's get started at the core of what makes her so great, the skills. For starters, let's look at the first skill you can get with her, Spiral Rend. This is my favorite of these sort of starter skills because it makes Kurenai have the necessary amount of protection to have the attack complete and also protection and damage on the way down. That alone makes it worthwhile to take since it can get her out of harm's way for ground-based projectiles and attacks. Similar to Murasaki's attack in that the skill goes up and then down. It doesn't hold her in the air, and it also doesn't make her liable to take a big hit coming down. It's a very good filler skill to take. Gale Slash gives her a finishing move that can be comboed from just about any other move she's got. It's on a 2-second cooldown, so you're going to be able to use it at just about any time. It's also her triple red skill, though you can use it without reds to get out of a move's recovery. 1 red increases particle charge, 2 reds restores HP by 3% of the damage, and 3 reds increases the move's critical hit rate. The move's super fast and can be used in a variety of situations. It requires some learning though, as the game gives an enormous visual cue to hit the button, but you can still miss it. You can't be too early or too late, you gotta nail the timing to do the big damage finisher. It homes in on the target too, and will have Kurenai lunge a good distance to make that hit. Although the animation looks like she's nearly going to miss them, that hit did make it. This sort of finisher I'm not too keen on using her basic attack string with, since it takes so long to get to the end. I end up usually dodging out midway to avoid an attack, and I'll barely ever see the Gale Slash proc on her basic attacks. This is something to use on getting out of recoveries for other skills. However, it also eats up a skill slot for a skill you may or may not get a lot of use out of. It's practical, but not for everywhere. Tornado Rend is one of Kurenai's ranged solutions. She charges up and throws out a whirlwind that travels slowly from the cast location. 2 greens stuns the target, 2 blues knocks up the target on hit, and 2 reds makes the whirlwind stay in place. The slow speed of the tornado along with the little AoE it has makes it good for enemies that are incredibly large and have a lot of HP. In general purposes, this skill won't see too much use. You have to get a little creative with those forced 2D segments in the arena, since it creates a pressure zone since they have to walk into it somehow. The low cooldown means many of these whirlwinds can come out at the same time, but this skill is better left at home, or better yet you just take the upgraded version later. Deflecting Wind is her counter skill. It's not as versatile or as powerful as Murasaki's, but it does heal. Main Green restores HP by 5% of the damage dealt, Main Blue reduces the target's defense by 20% for 10 seconds, and Main Red makes the target groggy. This skill I mainly use for the no fuss healing it has. However, I'm not too partial on these sorts of skills where I have to take a hit first in order for them to activate. Using this skill requires Kurenai to be in harm's way alongside knowing when a hit is coming. You can sit there for the full duration and a hit will eventually come, but it's much more fluid and effective in the fray. A 5% restoration from damage dealt is pretty nifty on any other skill, but on this it pretty much means it'll be a net 0. However, when God's Eye is up and you decide to use this, the healing will be much more substantial. Not to go unmentioned is the fact that she can apply 2 very powerful debuffs with this skill. 20% defense down is nothing to sneer at, along with the ability to make an enemy instantly groggy. Low cooldown makes it so that it can be used whenever you need it. It's a very important attribute for a healing or debuff move. It's a solid skill regardless, and requires a finesse to use it, along with God's Eye to get maximum benefit. Not to mention you can use Gale Slash to get out of the recovery too, and possibly even heal again with that move as well, making Kurenai more bulky and on the move. Kamanitachi is a really nifty attack. It teleports Kurenai to the target's location and has her slash everyone there. It's a really expensive skill, and that it requires 3 of a certain color to get into use. 3 greens changes the attack to stab, and it does more damage. 3 blues reduces the cooldown by 30%, and 3 reds reduces the target's speed by 30% for 10 seconds. I like skills that teleport because they're good for picking off the faraway enemy that didn't get scooped up in my kiting or any enemies that ran away. This is Kurenai's gap closer, and it does the job well. Of course, you can't be too far away or else she just dashes twice. Regardless of the activation semantics, this skill synergizes well with Gale Slash, especially with the proper red due to the enemy slow. At 13 seconds it seems like a long time. Skill training at max takes this down to 9.1 seconds. However, the blue set reduces cooldown by 30% and skill training is another 30%. So this skill can go down as far as 5.2 seconds. That's as spammable as some of Asagi's moves. Blue builds keep the damage flowing on this skill, and it's ready when you are in this case. Though in other colors it still has a very long cooldown. Green is quite underwhelming with the way it changes the animation for damage, because it now goes from a wide slash in front to a small area in front of her. It's a great skill in blue, but everywhere else it leaves me wanting more. Howling Wind is Kurenai's version of Asagi's Million Stab skill. The only differences being that Kurenai's is just dodge, then attack. Asagi's has her dodge, then press the attack button a million times, but not too fast though, or you'll end up ending the skill early. Kurenai's is just one touch and done. The entirety of the attack gets out, and there's not much recovery frames either. It's the superior version in many respects, just with a lower hit count. This is Kurenai's triple green skill, and with 1 she takes less damage during the skill, 2 increases the number of hits and gives a knockdown finisher, and 3 increases the critical hit damage by 250%. You start stacking that skill damage and packing a Kaworu's because this skill is the wedge that breaks anything it can get into. I mean, 14 seconds is a while for it to come off a cooldown, so you'll use this to make the big cascade and just rip off a ton of HP at once. Kurenai also gets great benefits from the demon attack supporters, along with the 2 melee attack boosting green supporters. Then she can pair this with God's Eye to jack up her crit rate and do crazy amounts of damage in one usage of this skill. One of her most defining moves in a color that gives her power unlike no other. This is the skill to go to if you're trying to get the big pick on a tough enemy, because it also means she can take a hit and keep stabbing. It's a great skill, 100% core, no doubt. And now the biggest and most important skill in Kurenai's arsenal, God's Eye. It increases her critical hit rate by a large percentage, so it pays to stack all your crits to get the most usage out of it. This skill isn't limited to just crit boosting either. It gives important and powerful benefits for all colors. 2 greens increases God's Eye critical hit rate by another 20%, 2 blues increases damage dealt by 20% for the duration, and 2 reds increases Kurenai's speed by 20% for the duration. It is the David linchpin of any build regarding her, since it is what makes Kurenai deliver so much damage. The green set makes sure that Kurenai almost always crits with every hit. Her damage gets boosted severely, making it a very worthwhile choice. The other colors are also incredible boons to her and shouldn't be looked over. Blue increasing her damage by a flat 20% is quite welcome, since it makes her crits hit harder without having to run a supporter that does that, alongside the fact that it pumps up her damage in a color that doesn't have boosters like green. Red builds having a ton of speed boosters also gives Kurenai a ton of chances to get her crits off and move like a tornado through a trailer park. She's moving like she's a serious EF5 because she's a serious EF5 cutie. God's Eye being on cooldown or active is a major consideration on how Kurenai wants to attack. It's how she does any real damage or gets any meaningful healing off. The eye lasting only 6 seconds means she has to make her big move count and also not get hit out of it at the same time. Losing out on that chance means she's waiting again. If that situation is dangerous, maybe you don't want to wait any longer so no more damage occurs. The cooldown at base is 12 seconds and the lowest it can go is 8.4 seconds. The mighty eye should always be taken and never let go unless you just want to play Kurenai as a day 1 release Asagi with middling benefit. It's her best skill and it matters the most. You milk it for all it's worth and you keep it on cooldown as much as possible. Shinganji dual wield style is her Taimanin art. It gives a 30% boost to her damage and increases her particle charge by 50%. It's standard fare, but it also gives an important upgrade to her basic attacks. It adds in these power slashes every couple of hits that deal a huge amount of damage. There's no other button you have to hit for this to happen either. It just appears as a big green streak across the screen and suddenly you've done like 10,000 damage. You can honestly just use her basic attack string during God's Eye and you can't go wrong. Her Taimanin art being such an incredible power surge along with God's Eye means she's never without some sort of huge damage dealing option regardless of what's taken. You can get like 1 or 2 full basic combos out of God's Eye and do a severe amount of damage. Honestly, even with how good this skill is, it doesn't need to be taken everywhere. You could omit this for a healing or some other skill and do just fine. It may be a hit to damage, but if your kit needs some skill to go succeed, then you can skip this. Though for 90% of situations, you can take this skill and be alright. Storm Zone is a really awesome skill on a really high cooldown. It's her big blue skill and it's worthwhile to invest in it. 1 increases the tornado stab's AoE, 2 adds in several smaller tornadoes that fly out when she lands, and 3 increases the damage by 150%. Not only does this skill work as a quick hit with an escape, it knocks enemies into the air. Even if it didn't, it still deals a great amount of damage. The quick hit I'm not a fan of, but I'm even more elated on the fact that her recovery frames have that protection option when she has 2 blues equipped. It makes me wish characters had something like that more often, then they'd all be the same as each other and no one would be special. It's a great skill held by the fact that it's 17 seconds on base cooldown, so it's only getting used at the beginning of a wave or against a tough enemy. It's picky, but it's meant to get picks, and I appreciate the effort it goes to do so. It's an offensive-defensive skill for sure, and I wouldn't take this bare, but if I was doing a sort of hybrid build, I'd want this for the protection and AoE clearing ability it has. That initial tornado stab is huge, but it needs more people inside it for real clearing power. Situational everywhere else, even in blue builds. And her 81 skill is Storm Fang. It's essentially an upgraded version of Tornado Rend. It also activates the same way too. Instead of spawning the tornado in front of her, she chucks her sword at the target to drop a whole tornado on top of them. It isn't a wimpy whirlwind either. This thing is like an EF3 or something. Now with 2 greens, the tornado reduces enemy speed by 20%, 2 blues has the tornado pull enemies in, and 2 reds increases particle charge by 3%. Green and blue are the real cells of this skill, alongside the fact that it's only got a 10-second cooldown for what essentially is a homing missile. Blue enjoys the suction feature, so it can plant AoEs all day, and green enjoys slower enemies to make it easier to milk a God's Eye, or have them hold still in a singular area. Is it worth going all the way to 81 for what is an upgraded Tornado Rend in all aspects? No, it's not. 81 for Kurenai is more stats. This skill is to congratulate you for getting there. Blue gets the most use out of this, but to get to 81 just to make a build work is not in the best interest of anyone. You take this skill and try it out, then go back to your regularly scheduled farming setup on Kurenai. Kurenai's supporters are extremely straightforward. She only needs about 4 for her core, and another few for situational rotation. Her core supporters are the Demon Attack Up supporter, the 2 melee boosting supporters, and Kaoru for the crit boost. This puts her into a green build, and frankly it's what she is going to get railroaded into, because a combination of these supporters jacks up her damage astronomically, even before Magatama Edition as well. With Magatamas, she can access the coveted critical damage boost nodes. Almost all situations can be solved with those supports. However, there are situations where you can't always do huge damage. Shinjo Una and Shinonome Nanami are the premier HP supporters due to potion spawns and also their healing strength increase. They both come in green and allow for Kurenai's naturally huge crits to have enormous recovery. Yuri Hisui is good if Kurenai is able to keep her hit count high. Not only that, the powerful call effect gives her this enormous steroid to essentially evaporate whatever she touches for the duration. Kurenai in theory is cheap to play due to her natural power. To see her strength naturally, try a blue supporter build. There's no crit bonuses or type bonuses in there that are as substantial as her green, and you'll get to see her attack really at its most natural state. In conclusion, Kurenai is good. Good as a one-trick pony can be. However, that one trick sends her on a long touring career, and she still gets royalties even after her touring days are over. She's the Leo Anthony Gallagher Jr. of the Taimanin world. Because Kurenai has actual substance in her skills, people always know her for her God's Eye and always ask for it. However, God's Eye is integrated so much into how she plays and her style that going without it is an active detriment. It giving 3 huge buffs for her depending on the color essentially forces the player to take it, unless they want to be a Contranian and say the skill is bad. Can't really say her stats are poor either, since she's quite middle of the road in terms of those. They've really done a lot to make sure that she's going to be usable and relevant for most players in their low to medium content farms. Even for the more hardcore, she can handle herself there due to the awakening bonuses granting her possibly greater damage. Thing is though, with all these amazing attributes and powers, she doesn't feel fun to play. Like the initial wow factor was there when I'm doing earth-shattering damage as her at extremely low levels, but after that's all said and done, all I have is now her incredible speed. Like there are many wind users in the game, but they manage to give a degree of style and a part of themselves into that. I mean, she's also a vampire. Where's that integrated? Like, they could have done with some vampire skills or something. I digress. That's a me thing. I see her more as a tool, like a garage opener or a washing machine. She accomplishes her task in a timely manner and does it efficiently with minimal waste. I can complete my farming chores the fastest with her due to her abilities, but I don't treat her any more than that. That's not on her as a character, that's just how she is mechanically. But is she worth it though? Yes, 1,000 times yes. She's cost effective and will pull through with sheer power on a minimal cost. Just give her the stats and she'll do the rest. She's a perfect first acquisition for younger players and will continue to find them use. because this baddie broad is a winner, and you will be too with her on your team. Oh lord, it wasn't that something. Thanks for coming on out and learning with your boy Hardcorn. Make sure you hit that like and subscribe button. Leave a comment too, because I love to hear from you guys and maybe get some ideas from where to go next. And as always, I'll see you next time.